Hey everyone, welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. I'm Brian Doyle.
I'm Rob Rogers.
I'm Tim McNeil.
And we are the deans working with you today. What was that, Tim?
He stole my line. I'm supposed to
steal your line. That's it. So yeah, one of these days we'll get this intro down. We haven't done a good job. It's only 155 episodes deep now, right?
This is a slow burn. It takes time.
We prove that analogy that many people said, that salespeople aren't very smart sometimes. But anyway, we're excited to kick things off today. With us today, we've got Jake Carroll, who works with Rob and Tim over at OSR Manage on that side of their business. And we've asked Jake to come on board because we get a lot of questions from our listeners around, hey man, I'm not a sales manager. I've not been one. I'm a technical leader. And I want to understand a little bit about how I can approach sales, approach managing my team. And then, from my seat, since I have no connection with the OSR team, I might even argue, and if you're not a sales leader, why you might not be best equipped to do so. So that's really what we're going to talk about today. Jake, welcome.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having us. Having me, I should say.
I work with every day. These other two guys every week,
We've been here before.
happy to be a relief pitcher here and throw a change up or typical content.
Jake, before we get started, man, let's talk a little bit about you. One of the things that our listeners love to know is, how do people arrive in the MSP industry? And maybe tell us a little bit about your background, since you've got kind of one that people might not know about.
Thanks, Brian. Well, it's always been a sales background. And like a lot of people who end up in sales as a career, it's like a career by default. Your degree or lack of degree from college puts you at a point where you say, I can't make enough money here. How else can I do this? And sales kind of chooses you more than anything else. And I am that person, right? My background is, I started out like everybody else who's my age, selling photocopiers, because you could get a job. There was no salary, and you just had to go bang on doors until you sold enough to where someone said, well, he's worth investing in training. Let's send him. So it was really just about, will you go do the work? And if you do, and you follow some of your instructions, we'll actually give you real training, in which, if anybody hasn't had really good sales training, copier business was the place to get sales training back then. They were typically, if you weren't working for IBM or Xerox or one of the big copier companies, you were working for people who came from there, and that was some of the best training I ever had. But
Jake, I was one of those people. It was great. Right? My first VP when I was selling telecom was a guy that was a copier salesman, and he used to love to tell us all the time, all I listen to you guys do is moan and groan about, I can't find leads. Your territory is literally anywhere in the state of Connecticut. He goes, when I started selling copiers, I could only sell in World Trade Center Tower 1 and Tower 2. That was my entire client base, my entire territory. And every day I had to pull the copier out and go up to the next floor. And it resonated with me. But the truth was, that's what made him a great salesperson too. I mean, there was really, it's like, hey, you got to make it happen in these two buildings or you don't eat.
Not a lot of safety net there. You just got to kind of grind it out.
Jake, how long were you in copier sales?
I lasted in copier sales for 2.5 years before I landed with my first technology company. And I will tell you that I was a dinosaur there by 2.5 years.
The churn and burn, right?
Turnstile was active. As soon as you're on a draw or no commission and you go 90 days and your pipeline looks pretty empty, like you're clearly going on, if you're in Albany, you're probably applying for state work. The relevant experience to this podcast it's called MSP Business School, is in 2001, I invested in a small company in Albany, New York called Autotask. And while I was still at another local company here, and in 2004, I finally joined. And between my initial investment and the day I joined, they had grown to a whopping 12 people over the course of those 3 years. And so it was a really early startup. And it turns out my first 3 jobs were in tech, were 2 startups and 1 just post IPO company. Then, watched them grow. So it had a little bit to do with that. But the relevant experience is 16 years at Autotask and Datto before I joined Rob and Tim here at OSR. Always in a sales role of some kind.
Yep, and that Autotask journey was amazing, was it not?
It is an amazing ride, and everything from, a founder-led company that was just grinding it out in the dirt, every day, with a little bit of funding, friends and family around, that kind of thing. When I finally joined, there was a second round with a local investor called First Albany Tech Ventures, which strangely enough was also the underwriter of a previous company that I'd worked for 5 or 6 years, 6 years actually. So there was a lot of commonality there, and that's when I finally decided, like, not only can I put my cash into the business as an investment, I'm willing to actually make my money here now that there's more people in, and not have too much risk out there. And then it grew, right place, right time for a product that was begging for an alternative in the marketplace, that was cloud-based, the first cloud-based product for managed service providers to run their business on their professional services automation platform. And the message was well received, product was well priced, good company, and just grew. It went. And
Jake, how big was it when you left, people wise?
Yeah.
Well, when I
came in at 12.
Came in at 12, and when I left, it was 3 years post the Datto acquisition. So when you think about it, it was over 2,000 people between the combined companies by the time I left, from 12. And Autotask was close to 500 when the acquisition occurred worldwide.
Jeez.
Wow.
Louise.
And it was truly really smart people, good people I worked with before that have done it, multiple times with other companies, people you trusted. It was a confluence of as many good things as you could think about in a startup, which, as you guys know, fail at about a 90% rate.
Yeah.
To get it to the stars to align and have it all happen in a brutally competitive market, in a hard product to sell, frankly. It was a bunch of really, I would say, fortune as well as, good people turned that thing into a really viable company.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's very cool.
That is cool. So let's transition now from a little bit of your background into, what is your role as a virtual sales manager, and what are you, what is your day-to-day look like? So let's start first with, what are you really doing? Because I think a lot of folks might not even understand what a virtual sales manager can be. Yeah. So maybe tell us a little bit about your day-to-day.
That's a good point, right? Like, and I'll limit it to like the businesses that we help and sell to, which are managed service providers or technology service providers. In that they are typically, as you guys know, because you've been in all of those businesses, they're usually technology founders in those businesses. And, we come in, when you want to grow a sales team or you want to increase, the rate of new customer acquisition, and you've kind of run out of referrals, friends and family to speak to, your Rotary Club has been worn out, you're doing all the work as a business owner that you possibly can, and that rate of customer acquisition isn't where you want to be. You're going to have to grow your sales team in some capacity or another. And I think for a lot of business owners that are at all self-aware that if you're not a sales manager by trade, it's a totally different animal. So the example I always like to use is, like, if I ask a managed service provider business owner, tell me a little bit about what you have in place for your technicians. When you need another one, do you know exactly when you need another one? Yes. When I get to this many customers with this many endpoints, I'm at the point where I need to hire another person. Okay. Do you know what to look for? Yes, I know exactly what to look for, either a level 1, 2, or 3 tech. Great. Do you have systems in place for them? Yes, I have Autotask, I have ConnectWise, I have a bunch of different tools. You have training? Yes, we have training and onboarding. How can you get them up to running fast? Well, we've got this great knowledge base. I can hire a level 1. I can train them to be a level 2. I know exactly what to do. Great. You have metrics? Yeah, I have metrics for first call resolution time. I have metrics for SLAs with my customers. I have all these things built into my current systems. That is outstanding. Now, for your salesperson, tell me which of those things you have in place. Do you know what you're looking for? If you hired a good salesperson, would you know how to manage them? Do you have the metric in place, the KPIs, the accountability? Can you really help them in terms of, I want to go on a sales call with a leader in my company because you're the leader of the company. Like, what can you teach me in terms of just sales tactics and those kinds of things? And they all say nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, no, they don't say nothing. What they say is, what I've learned from growing this business from the ground up since I started it, I've been able to do. So what we're here to do on a fractional level is, well, if you want to grow your sales team, hiring a sales manager and a salesperson typically doesn't align with where the revenue is at the time, right? But you need a person, or you need to kind of do something. So we come in as a fractional, VP of sales or director of sales to help them recruit, train, and manage their partners or their new employees. and come in with systems and playbooks and battle cards that can bring that business forward probably years from where it would take you to kind of figure it out on your own. And that's the biggest thing, right? It's like they've got all this really good process in place from the technical side of the business. And I think what a lot of technology business owners, what we can help them understand is it's the same thing on the sales side. Like the myth that you can hire the person who lights up the room and is magnetic, that's going to, for them to be a good salesperson, to sell your product at your price in your market is a big fallacy that gets people to burn a lot of cash when they don't really need to. So that's where we come in and kind of just say, look, the exact same process that you do for tech, we do for sales.
No.
And if you're not paying that level of attention to detail, to hiring, to training, to onboarding, to growing, it's not likely to be a successful endeavor.
Well, I would even argue that whenever you hire a tech or an engineer, depending on what level it is, or really any level, a salesperson really needs more. They need more training. They need more management. They need more oversight. Right? They just do.
Yeah.
They just do.
That's true. Yeah, I would agree.
And I think another great point that you brought out there, and this is something that I've seen technology founders really struggle with, is because they don't understand sales and the sales process. Most of their selling is done through referrals, done through introduction-based sales. They don't really know how to define the process for a salesperson. So, that whole thing about getting a magnetic personality, you might even find that personality and you're still going to fail, because the reality is you don't have anything to guide them with, and they're just kind of out there floundering on their own.
Yep.
Well, yeah. And that's a great point, Brian, because there's a difference between someone who comes to you through a referral from a customer, from a friend who's looking for a solution. And let's be fair. Most small and medium-sized business owners who don't even know if they need technology provider yet, or their ability to actually differentiate like who to pick, what to look for is really minimal, right? So they're probably coming to you going like, look, I need some help. My friend uses you, loves what you're doing for him, says it's changed his business around. Can you help me? And if that answer is, yeah, let's have a conversation about what you want, what your goals are. And I can share with you some of the things that I've done for other companies, what I think are the right things for you to do for your business, right? As opposed to you're going to hire a salesperson who's going to try to manufacture a piece of business from whole cloth, who's going to call somebody who probably isn't even aware they're certainly not aware of who you are. Right? They're not aware of why you're calling. They may not even be aware they have a problem, and they're certainly not aware of like the impact that problem could potentially be having on their business. The totally different way that you have to sell to that client. You're going in with zero credibility. Nobody knows who you are, and they haven't even thought about whether they should consider whether the problem that you're bringing to them is worth them evaluating and solving now, as opposed to the person that comes to you from referral that says, I got a problem. I talked to a friend. He's working with you. Help me. Right. That's a totally different animal.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, I actually had a call with somebody, with a client of ours earlier, and he was kind of frustrated. Excuse me. He was kind of frustrated because he was at a 20% close rate with the prospects that he's talking to. And, the more I talk to him about it, he's got a bunch of maybes. And I was like, honestly, a month from today, when we talk, your close ratio is probably going to be 25 to 30% on your last 15 proposals. That is on average or well above average, the traditional cold call closing appointment. I think that's the biggest thing that's probably the biggest hurdle that the MSP owner has to get over in their head, is understanding that there is a huge difference between a cold call and a warm lead.
Yeah. And how to nurture and cultivate and build pipeline.
Yeah.
That's a different animal. And look, the only reason that most folks are doing that and deciding that I'm going to go out and hire a salesperson is that where you want to take the business, and if your 3 to 5 year plan, whether that includes revenue growth, new markets, an exit plan for you and your family from the business at some point, requires a rate of growth that can no longer be sustained through referrals or organic growth of your customer base, or even introducing new services to your customer base, which, as you guys know, is the most frictionless, cost-effective way to build your business. Is, can I add new services to the existing customers that I have? Can I expand within the technology stack within those companies? And is there organic growth at a rate that sustains the growth that I need. And in many cases, when we get involved, they've made the calculation that no, this is going to take some more proactive sales activity on our part to grow the way we want to grow.
So I got a question for you, Jake. Gonna put you on the spot a little bit here.
All right.
So what would you say? Like you manage lots of people, right? You're managing owners, you're managing salespeople. What would you say is probably what you have to do the most for, during your management time? Are you coaching reps up? Are you doing accountability? Are you being the person in between the owner and the sales rep? Like, what would you say is the most time-consuming part of your job?
Yeah, we're as a sales manager, when you're working for anyone, the majority of your time should be spent with your reps, right? So if that's not where you're spending the majority of your time, training, guiding, mentoring, holding accountable, ensuring that everybody in the company is on the same page relative to commitments salespeople are making, your ability to deliver, like that's the job, right? But the thing is, don't confuse what team you're on. Like if you're hired as a sales executive, you are on the executive team. Now, and where you can make the mistake sometimes as a sales manager is your team, like your sergeants, whether you're a director and you have sales managers, or you're a VP and you have directors and sales managers and salespeople under it. That is your team, but your number one team is your executive team. So I think getting that right first is really important. And in the businesses that we work with, Rob, you've said this a number of times, which is the salespeople that you're hiring into the business are never going to be as good as you, business owner, at selling this offering, right? There's two things working in your favor. You've grown this thing from the ground up. You know exactly every customer story that's out there because you sold them, and probably from a technical perspective, you helped onboard them. You've done all those things. And when you needed resource for a new account, you had it because you managed both sides of the business. When someone said, when can you have a proposal ready? You're probably thinking in your own head, well, do I have anything to do tonight? And can I finish it before I go to bed?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to if a salesperson that's out there talking to someone has to give them a timeline on when they can deliver a proposal, if they don't already have it cooked with the process that says, a standard proposal is 5 days and a complex proposal is 10 days, they got to go back and get an answer. So, Brian, the short answer to your question is I spend the majority of our time is spent with the folks that we're managing, and then keeping the business owners that we work for updated on status updates. What are they seeing? Here's the progress that we're making. Are we on track? What are you seeing? Are you seeing the same things we're seeing? Because we're remote for the most part, and we don't get to read a lot of what time did you come in the morning, and did you greet people when you came in? Did you keep your office door open or closed? How are they culturally? So, most of our time spent with reps, because look, if they fail, the whole thing fails, right? So we have to make them successful. And so that's where we spend the majority of our time.
I want to go back to what you were saying about the fact that there's got to be different expectation levels as well between the sales rep and the owner-led sales. I think one of the biggest things that I see as a failing, and I experienced it when I went in as a hired gun after selling my MSP, working with a different organization, was exactly what you're talking about, that quote process. Who's going to be involved in building that quote? What is the turnaround time? How do you hold feet to the fire if, let's say, an engineer is involved with an architecture discussion for that, and not getting the, hey, man, we've had too many fires to put out. I can't get to your quote, because the sales is a fire as well, right?
Yeah.
So, that conditioning the technology owner to understand that a process needs to be implemented to support and nurture the sales process is huge. Because to your point, I can go as an owner and go, this feels like $6,000, put it down on a piece of paper tonight and put it out there. And if I'm wrong, my problem, right? The sales rep, the problem gets compounded because there's a commission that might have to be paid off of that mistake that's put out there. You may hold the sales rep accountable if they were the one that put the price there. So that chain of command, or that custody of getting, coming in with a needs assessment and a requirement being built to actually turning around a proposal, is one of the biggest areas I've seen MSPs fail with sales reps, because it's one of two things. If the sales rep is good, they get frustrated because they're not able to keep sales traction. And if they're not good, it breaks down because nobody's following up, and now the sale gets, lost in the weeds. So how does somebody like you kind of tackle those problems?
Well, the way we tackle it is a playbook, right? And one of the biggest discussions that we have with owners and salespeople all the time is, this isn't going to be frictionless, but this should be a team that works together. And for instance, like one of the ways to ensure your sales cycle is going to get bogged down is if your salespeople can't schedule next steps in whatever meeting they're in right now, whatever call they're having right now, if they can't definitively and confidently schedule the next meeting, then that's going to delay your sales cycle, because then they're going to leave the meeting and say, hey, I'll call you Monday and we'll schedule the next thing as soon as I find out when I can deliver a quote. As opposed to, this is a pretty standard quote for us. General turnaround, this is in 5 days. That will be next Wednesday. How does that work for you? That works fine for me. Okay, can we put a backstop on this next Wednesday at say 2:00? I know you're busy. I'm busy. I just want to make sure I have an opportunity to go through this with you. Can you put something in your calendar while you're in the meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. And if you can't do that because you really don't have the confidence level to know when you can have that meeting, will the quote be ready? Because like there's two things, right? You want to be confident that you're picking the right date, but two is you don't want to miss the date. Like you don't want to call a customer back and tell them something you told them you could do on a certain date by a certain time, the first deliverable you have with them other than showing up to today's meeting, and you got to push it. Yeah. That sends a signal too. So the key thing is that it doesn't matter whether a standard proposal is 5 or 7 days. It doesn't matter whether a complex proposal is 8 or 10 days. I hate that they're both that long, but the fact that they just have to know that, right? Yep. They got to know what that number is confidently so that they can, if they want to put an extra day on it to make sure they don't miss it, they can. But that's the thing, right? And to our first point, which was owners typically who have run sales process before don't run into that because they were the person who probably did both or could put the hand on the resource to say, hey, drop what you're doing. I got to get this quote out. It's a really good big customer we want to go after. So that really needs to be resolved. And sales playbook, agreed upon, documented process, which, by the way, these business owners are really good at process. We tell them we got another process we want to do on sales that's going to alleviate a lot of bottlenecks and thrash down the road for you and your team and expectations of your customer. They're usually all in on getting it done.
Yeah. And it's almost like you've talked about that standard first complex before.
We have. Yeah. Yeah. Look, it's a natural point of friction in any organization where sales and tech have to work together to get stuff out. And if you don't resolve it, it's a death spiral.
Yep. Yes.
Sure. So we've now talked about, kind of getting the team rallied, getting it out there and getting the proposal put together and at least putting some parameters through a playbook to get that put into place. Maybe we can spend a few minutes before we close out for today and talk a little bit about how do you keep this momentum in the sales cycle and when do you call it quits on a deal and get a rep to understand it's time to move on.
Well, obviously,
first of all, one for you.
Well, it depends on where you are, right, in the sales cycle. There's really good indicators that you've got good momentum in the deal, and nothing is more simple than what's your email pace back and forth? Are you getting quick answers back? Are they engaged? Are they in it, right? That's a really good indicator is your email frequency back and forth from the company you're working with and the person you're working with at that company. Really good indicator. The thing about keeping momentum in a deal, I can't stress this enough, is like there's table stakes in every meeting you have. If you don't start every meeting with, this is our agenda in this meeting, these are our expectations or the objectives of the meeting, are we all in agreement? Yeah, that the next step logically after this meeting is this typically for our previous customers that we work with, usually for them after this meeting, the next step is ABC. Does that sound like it's your, yes. Okay, so at the end of the meeting, you're either going to throw me out or we'll move to the next thing. Does that sound good? Yeah. So you establish that at the beginning of every meeting. And when you get to the end, you guys know how if you've been in a proposal meeting with someone or you've been in a discovery meeting, you're trying to get good information, you're trying to figure out like, what's my value here? How can I differentiate what's important to my prospect? What's driving their business? Usually you schedule those meetings for an hour. And if you're, if I'm in the meeting, I say it takes me half hour to say hi. And then we start. Gotta get better at that. But you've got to leave 10 minutes at the end of that meeting to get next steps nailed, right? Even if that means like, we coach our salespeople. Just we'll talk to your owner about this, but you may have to interrupt them at 10 minutes left to say, hey, look, this is a great conversation, but I know we all only have 10 minutes left. How are we doing? And like, you got to have that pause in there to make sure that you can wrap the meeting and get next steps. That's really critical in terms of deal momentum. Now, the other thing I'll say is if you have a standard proposal and it's going to take 5 days, or you have a really complex thing, it's going to be a move, there's going to be new equipment, it's kind of green field, there's a lot going on in this. a proposal that you're trying to do for someone, and it's going to be 10 days, then I've been seeing a lot of things on sell between, which are how do you keep your prospect engaged for the next 10 days, right? While basically everything's on you for a deliverable. Is that could be a email from you to your contacts and decision makers that are industry pieces that highlight risk. Sometimes make sure you're keeping them urgent. Hey, look, here's something on cybersecurity insurance that I saw. I know we talked about this last week. Thought it would be important. Hit them with it.
Hey, Jake, hold on a second. I want you to back up for a second because that's very, very important. And I love when you do this. So back up, talk about it again, and say, the sale between and what you're really trying to accomplish with these sale betweens.
Yeah, what you're trying to accomplish during the sell between is to keep your customer engaged while there's some dead space in here while you're working on things, and make sure that you stay top of mind.
There you go.
Right.
Love it.
Thanks, Rob, for calling me out on that. Because if they're looking at people competitively, once you leave from your assessment meeting and decide you're going to give them a proposal in 10 days, there could be 2 or 3 other vendors coming in like right on top of you.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure. And by the way, these sell betweens don't have to have any call to action. You're not asking for anything from the client. Yeah. It's completely frictionless value that you're adding to the equation.
Value add.
So a thought leadership piece, something that highlights the risk, something that points out an industry best practice, something along those lines that you can continue to pepper your prospect with while you're waiting to get your proposal meeting out there, which you've already scheduled and have in the calendar, by the way, right? Yeah. And to do that. So the sell betweens are really important for deal momentum.
I love this because there's, everybody remembers the last meeting most, right? And I hated when I'd find out that I was the first guy in the door sometimes, because while that has the opportunity to be, while you have the opportunity to kind of set the tone, you're also what's being compared against. And if there's anything that's different that seems better, it kind of diminishes where you were when you got started. So the sell between can answer those questions, or at least maybe evoke the questions as well. When I hear people are going to take an evaluation with one of my competitors in between the meetings, and my cycle isn't to meet with them for 2 more weeks, I do exactly what you're saying, Jake. I do the touch base. Hey, do you have any questions? Hey, here's something that I didn't cover in our meeting that's a feature that we don't get to during the trial, just to make sure that there's something out in front of them that goes, oh yeah, I just heard about that in my last meeting, because I know what my competitors got that they might highlight when they're competing against me. Let's make sure I'm putting it in front of their face as well, because a lot of times in this industry, unfortunately, he who shows up last, as long as they had the best, as long as they have a pulse and really showed something, can sometimes be the one selected if all pricing's equal.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, like, you're dealing with a buyer, as we said earlier in the call, was that the buyer doesn't necessarily know how to tell the difference, right? If you're doing standard, hey, 24/7 open communication, you're going to get proactive support for 365 days a year. Here's our testimonials from our customers. They're turning to the back page of the proposal and looking at the price, right? And like, who's less money? Do I really know the difference? I got 3 vendors in here. They're all telling me the same thing.
Well, who do I like the most?
Yeah. Who do I like the most? Who brought in the best lunch?
Yeah.
Who's got the nicest office?
Yeah.
Who's got the nicest office? Who do I like best? What's the price? That's why, the other thing that we like to coach into our sales reps is you don't just rely on feature, advantage, benefit, right? To tell them what's going on. Sell to the problem. If you have to create one, create one. It's the only way you're going to get urgency and decision made now, and hold yourself different than probably 90% of the salespeople that are out there, is to sell to the problem, make it personal to the person in terms of the impact of the problem, and relative to the market, what you're seeing in the market, so you look smarter than everybody else. So it can't be about you, the MSP. It has to be about the customer and their goals and their problems and what happens. And the hardest thing for any salesperson to do, experienced or otherwise, is to get beneath surface level pain. Like if someone comes and says, why are you looking for another provider? Well, communication is bad. Okay. The internet's blocky. Our onboarding and offboarding process for new employees is really not great. And I'm a little bit worried about, skill set overall. Okay. In your mind, as a salesperson or as an owner or even a technical person, you're like, I can solve every single one of those problems. Let me tell you how. Yeah. As opposed to take a beat and say, Interesting. In terms of onboarding and offboarding, who's in charge of that? That's Joe. How does Joe do it now? Well, it's manual. What's he got to do? Well, he's got to go out to the location. Oh, okay. And how much of his day does it take? Right. If you take that second level to just understand the impact of a problem, then the impact tends to be a bit of a salesy word. But if you say, tell me the ripple effect of that problem. Who does that impact most? Who does that affect most? Like, what happens next? You're going to get a level of understanding of a business problem that maybe another person who was jumping to a solution right away does not get to. And that will further validate you in there that you know their business, particularly if you can bring relevant stories from other customers that look just like them that have solved it. So to me, that's the big thing in terms of getting yourself differentiated a little bit, particularly if there's 3 vendors and Brian, you might not be the last one in, because you got to be the lasting impression that you know more about their business than anybody else that's walking into place.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know we're getting up against time here, so I'm sure we can keep this conversation going for another half hour, maybe 2,
this
right?
The stuff I love. Yeah. I love this strategy stuff.
Here's what where I sit with this. First, if you're a technical owner out there and you're listening to this and you're going, oh my God, I don't have my stuff together, we encourage you to reach out to Jake. And his information will obviously be in this week's link as well, both on our webpage and elsewhere. But reach out to Jake. He can at least answer some questions. And if you find out that you need somebody doing it, do so. The next thing is I'd like to introduce this as a regular piece inside of MSP Business School. I think putting Jake on the spot here, but Jake, I think we need to have you come back once a quarter and really talk about a viewpoint from somebody that's managing multiple reps every single day. Because I think that's the part that most MSPs struggle with. They might have 1 or 2 reps that they're managing, but they're not seeing what's working in different geographies. They're not seeing what's working in different size and scopes of MSPs. You've got that visibility, and it's a unique visibility. So thanks for becoming a regular correspondent, joining us quarterly.
Appreciate it, Jake. Thank you, sir.
It's a very high honor.
What just happened?
I don't know. Evidently, I just became a roving reporter for comments.
Yeah. What you saw there is I just took heed of everything with Jake, and I decided that we were going for the close. So we scheduled our next meeting. We made sure he was part of it, and I got the outcome I was looking for. So good work, Jake. You got me right where I needed to be today.
Perfect. Well, happy to be here. Let me know when you need me again. Talk to you guys soon.
You got it. No, Jake, thanks for joining us. Robb, Tim, always a pleasure.
Yep.
Robb, you want to take us the rest of the way home?
Sure. You mentioned, I do want to, if anybody takes away 3 words from this, take away the issues, the impact that it does, and then the understanding of that impact. And if you can do that, then you've just grown as a salesperson. But Jake, once again, I want to thank you for joining us. We will be including Jake's LinkedIn information with this podcast. And this episode will be up on mspbusinessschool.com and anywhere you get your podcast, to include YouTube. So please go there, like, subscribe, and throw down a comment. We'd appreciate it. Fellas, all the best. I look forward to talking to you next time.
See you guys.
Bye.
Have a good one.